Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Discovering Multifamily. I'm your host, Anthony Scandariato with Red Knight Properties. And today we have not one, but two very special and lovely guests with us today, Sandy and Albert, and Sandy Yong and Albert Ho. And did I say that right, guys?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Yep.
Mhm.
All right, perfect. And Sandy and Albert are actually from Toronto. They're a married couple, and they are it's what we consider the property power couple that focuses on condo rentals. And together, they have a few condo rentals in Toronto that they rent out, and another right now in pre-construction that will be ready in the next year. Besides real estate investing, they are both authors and keynote speakers. So Sandy has a newly published book, which is called The Money Master, and we'll have Sandy talk about that. And it focuses on helping female millennials create wealth through investing through various different ways, not only real estate. And Albert also has a book as well. Albert comes from a little bit of a different background, but his book is called Checkmate: How to Win the Sales Game in Healthcare. He helps healthcare sales professionals generate $1 million of sales within a year. So it'll be interesting to hear both of their stories and how they're able to build wealth for themselves and also their clients. So I really appreciate you guys both coming on, and want to hear definitely more about yourselves and your book and what you guys are up to.
Great. Thank you, Anthony, for having us. We're so excited to be on your show.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony.
Thanks for coming on. Great. So Sandy, you want to start with your book? And what,
Sure. Of course. Yeah. So for those listeners who don't know me, my name is Sandy Yong, and I graduated from Ryerson University here in Toronto, Canada. I studied business, and I was fortunate enough to graduate during our previous economic recession in 2009, where we had the housing crash and the stock markets went down. And then I started working in the hospitality and tourism field. And then from there, I kind of reflected on how I wanted to go about my career and what kind of milestones I wanted to reach. And so that's where I started saving up money and started investing into the stock market. But like majority of the people, I didn't know any better. And so I went into one of the big banks and purchased high-fee, high-risk mutual funds and ended up losing thousands of dollars. And that's where I was like really upset, because I was like, hey, I'm doing all the right things. Why isn't it not turning out to be what they're promising me, which would be like, stock market gains? And so that's where I decided to take matters into my own hands and decide to do the research and learn how to become a self-directed investor, and making over six figures by the age of 27. And then when I met Albert, we started doing real estate investing together. And so it's funny because in January 2018, Albert was like, hey, Sandy, I want to write a book. And I was like, okay, great. Like, that's an awesome New Year's resolution. I'm all for supporting you. And we went to a book writing seminar, and that's where we really found the kind of a light bulb moment where we figured out that having a book would really help us to open up doors of opportunity and help build our speaking and consulting business. And this is my book here. So my book is called The Money Master, where I teach female millennials how they can build wealth through investing, whether it's real estate, stock market, or through starting their own business.
That's awesome. How about you, Albert? How did you get warped into all this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my career started off in healthcare. So my mom's a physician and my sister is a physician. So I was like, well, I've always had an interest in getting into healthcare, and I ended up going to nursing school, and I had a long career working as a frontline nurse. And then around 2014, I got approached to start a medical device business. So I was like, okay, well, here I am selling something to sleep physicians and to patients, CPAP machines. And I wish that there was a book to help me increase my sales. And there wasn't anything out there. And that's when I decided to write my own book. So Checkmate: How to Win the Sales Game. And January 2018 is when I started that journey. And it's meant to help people that are in pharma sales, medical device sales, to become better in sales. So, and that's the end result.
Awesome. So did you make that decision because you got a little bit influenced by Sandy to kind of, or was it you didn't really want to be on the front line anymore? You wanted to be on the business side, but still work within the industry.
Well, it was a combination of factors. I mean, I was already owning a medical device business, and I was like, well, I'm already doing a lot of speaking, and I'm doing a bit of coaching. So it actually started off as my New Year's resolution, and then I kind of I dragged Sandy along to this book writing workshop. She had no intention of writing a book at all, but in a few months, we both had a passion for something, and that's why we decided to write two separate books. And even our publisher, Black Crab Books, had not come across a couple that was writing two separate books. Usually couples maybe write one book together, but we had such diverse passions that we had to write two separate books.
Yes, definitely very different backgrounds. So Sandy, I want to go back to you a little bit. You mentioned that both of you invest in real estate. Could you talk about that as one of your, I'm sure one of your points in your book, Sandy?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, like growing up, like going through our childhood games, like I would play Monopoly with my family and my friends. And that's kind of like how I started to learn or had that seed planted in my mind that you can really gain lots of wealth through investing in real estate. And for us, like we know that there's different ways to invest, like whether you want to rent out your properties to help pay off your mortgage, or through being a real estate agent or mortgage broker, or even flipping properties. For us, we really focus on the long-term investments, especially specifically in renting out condo units. So we do have two here in Toronto and another one just outside of Toronto. It's called Kitchener in Ontario. And so we're just gradually, one by one, building our portfolio, and we feel that it's a great way to be able to diversify our income sources and really get that hands-on experience, being able to take care of our tenants and see that we're over time being able to build our real estate empire.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And so why do you focus on condos as opposed to maybe a single family house or an apartment? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I would say that my parents were the inspiration because growing up, they were real estate investors themselves. So for the better part of 20 or 30 years, as long as I can remember, they were always kind of doing it on their own. And it was just kind of easier to deal with condos. You don't have to deal with the large costs with homes in terms of the purchase costs and then the upkeep, right? So condos, a lot of times it's just sort of a turnkey. There's always a property manager there on site. And over time, they had 4 or 5 units growing up, and I saw how they did it, and I learned firsthand from them.
Sure, that's awesome. And definitely the parents help, especially if they seen success. It's always one of the best role models you can have. So Albert, can you talk a little bit more about sales in the healthcare industry? That's
Sure.
Obviously the title of your book. And
yep. And that's a great question, Anthony, because I mean, when you think of pharma sales, the two types of people that I'm mainly trying to target are people that are in pharmaceutical sales or medical device sales. And I, growing up, I never thought I was good in sales. Like it's something that people always say that they hate doing, right? Oh, I'm not good in sales. But when I was faced with that opportunity, I really had to dig deep and really, I mean, sales is all about solving problems. And I believe that even all of your listeners could become better in sales by reading my book. And if they learn how to solve problems and listen to their customers, and no matter what it is in their life, I believe that they can also become better in sales.
Awesome. Yeah. And sales in any industry you're in is super important. I mean, even, real estate and, the business that I'm in, if, you gotta learn how to sell. And it's almost at this point, what are some of the techniques? To me, I've been finding that the best sales techniques, I mean, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is a perfect example. Listen more than you talk is one of the key sales strategies that I've seen to be successful for me, and ask a lot of questions. What else is out there?
Well, for me, I do have a sort of 5-step process. And so when you think about your prospects, who are you trying to help and what problem are you trying to solve? And once you find those kind of customers that have that problem, then you're actually approaching them, right? If you're trying to establish trust, making sure that, you're seen as someone that has the experience, that has done it before, and that can help them overcome that problem. And once you start to listen to what their problems are, then you can see if there's a potential solution. And if there's a direct match between that problem and solution, then you got to ask for that sale. So kind of going through that sales process, it just takes a bit of coaching for someone that hasn't done it before. But through my sales technique, I've been able to take people from nothing to their first million. That's sort of the sweet spot where I'm trying to establish myself as a market leader.
That's awesome. And when you do coach your sales strategies, is it specifically towards the healthcare industry? Because in that industry, it's, to me, and I could be wrong, is you're selling to other people within the industry, right? And other businesses, other hospitals. So they all are pretty educated, as opposed to, having to re-educate and explaining exactly what the product or service is. So do your techniques apply to any industry?
They can be. I mean, for me, my book focuses on, let's say, physicians as one particular chapter, hospitals, governments, and I basically have a chapter for each of those types of customers. But I believe that anyone that is interested in becoming better in sales would be able to benefit. And I actually do offer a downloadable copy of my book on my website, checkmatebook.ca. So specifically for your listeners, they can get it's no gimmicks, no tricks. Just put in your email, and anyone can get an exact digital copy of my book.
Awesome. And so, Sandy, I want to go back to you a little bit. So you guys are from Toronto, which is Canada. I mean, I'm in the US, we're basically neighbors. For the products and types of asset classes that you advise your clients to invest in, is it pretty much nationwide, or do you stick to companies in Toronto, or what? I'm just curious.
Right. So is this pertaining to the stock market?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, like when I was doing my research, I would follow the big investment gurus, whether it's Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, David Bach, and so on. And a lot of them had the same opinion, where it's really great to be able to focus on the long term, to have a passive investing approach rather than like active or like day trading, and to be able to diversify your portfolio. And that could mean, two things. Like I would say, in terms of thinking about like regions, you want to have a global portfolio, because for us, like wherever we're born, we tend to have a home country bias. So for us, like Canadians, we think, okay, great, like yeah, let's invest in Canada, without thinking about, well, what about the other parts of the world? Like obviously US is a big driver in new technologies, and part of the strongest countries in the world. And even internationally, there's a lot of great developing countries that have huge potentials to grow. And so you want to think more globally than locally, and also by industry. So it's hard to really cherry pick which industries are going to outperform in any given year. So it's just best to be able to invest in all industries. So like, for instance, you can invest in like the S&P 500, which has like the, largest 500 companies. And then that way you're not kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. You can actually put it in many baskets. And that way it's a more safer approach. But there are different investment philosophies out there. There are people who like to pick the hottest stocks. Like, even in the most recent years, we saw the trend in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and even investing in cannabis industry. But there's a lot of risk, right? A high risk, there's high reward, but a lot of people didn't know that they could lose their entire fortune. And it's just really sad to see that, that they kind of have to go back to square one. So that's where I think that's important to educate people, and make sure that you do your own research before you kind of throw all your money into like one company. It's just best to have it diversified instead.
And do you advise any of your clients to invest in crypto or Bitcoin or any of those? I personally don't do it. I like the hard, tangible assets like real estate, obviously.
Yeah, I talk briefly about it in my book, and I don't really advise in investing in cryptocurrency. Like, of course, you can make a quick buck, like, and whatnot, but it's really hard to figure out like what companies or what types of currencies will last. Like a lot of them have already gone down the drain. And so I would say like if you are, wanting to take a bit of risk, I typically say that you can maybe put a couple $100 in there and like invest in a few companies and see how it is and call it your fun money. Or maybe take a really small percentage of your portfolio to do that. And then that way you can still experiment and see how well you do, but you're really minimizing your risk.
Got it. And so what does a diverse portfolio look like to you?
Yeah, for me, I would say that like investing, say, in Canada, US, international markets, and investing in all different industries, whether it's like financials, new technology, healthcare, consumer staples, like all sorts, blue chip stocks. And then that way you kind of get a little bit of everything, kind of like a buffet, right? So instead of like choosing one thing, you might as well just have the full buffet.
Right.
And I think that's the safer way, and just not trying to tweak or like meddle in your portfolio. It's good to just maybe rebalance once or twice a year, and have a plan, right? You always want to think about, okay, what are your reasons for investing? Like, what do you want to get out of it? And what are your goals? Because if you don't even know why you're investing or what your objectives are, then it can be really tricky to like measure how well you're performing. And it's important to think about what your why is.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to the book publishing a little bit, because a lot of my listeners, are considering writing books too. Could you kind of talk about, I know, Albert, you mentioned it a little bit. Could you kind of talk about that whole process? Like, how long did it take you to write the book? Did you
And
write it
there
yourself
are
100% or?
Yeah, I wrote it all myself. I mean, there are sort of different schools of thought out there. I mean, some people say that they want to self-publish, or some people say they have to go with a big publisher. Black Card Books, I would say, is a bit of a hybrid. So, you do all the writing yourself, but then there are some approvals in terms of editing and quality. And it took me about a year and a half from start to finish. So January 2018 is when I attended their first book writing workshop. A couple months later is when I formally signed up with them. And that's when the clock really starts ticking. Most of our authors with Black Card Books, they do need to complete it within 2 years, because they just can't support authors that want to take 3, 4, 5 years. And even within that 2-year time frame, there's quite a lot of deliverables and timelines. Like, you have to get certain things done by a certain time. And we're lucky that we were able to support each other through it, because there are even some authors within Black Card Books that don't finish within that time frame. So it is sort of a labor of love. Everyone thinks it has to be the most perfect book with no typos, with groundbreaking research that is the size of War and Peace, and that is exactly the types of self-doubts that many authors have, right? They think, oh, there's already something out there. And that's, why they get caught in that. Like, I've come across authors that say they've been researching for 5 years or for 10 years. And it's simply, one of those things. You just got to get it out the door, and, you can always make revisions in the future if you'd like and get a reprint. But you really have to get started. And I wish that I'd done it sooner, earlier in my career. I find that most people think, oh, you have to have a lifetime of experience. And we were actually one of the youngest authors that were with this publisher. Most of them, I would say, they're 50s, 60s, and 70s even. And I would not want to wait until I'm that old to be publishing my first book. So I would say get out and do it. And you can check out their website. There's tons of other authors that you can see what else is out there. So really see what your interests are, and see what the market is demanding.
Did you guys write the books at the same time, or who wrote one first? Or
Yeah. So for us, like we decided to kind of jump in and take that leap of faith at the same time. So we were pretty much like going at the same pace, although we kind of made it a friendly competition to see like who would reach the next milestone next, and also kind of celebrate our weekly wins that way, and just to be able to help encourage and motivate each other. It was nice because we were able to also brainstorm ideas, think about like, okay, like, does this chapter title work, or do we need to like rewrite it? And so we were able to help support each other in that way. And even for those of for your listeners who are thinking about writing a book, it's really beneficial because it will help open up doors of opportunity for your business, whether it's to be able to do more consulting for your clients or to do more speaking engagements, because you'll see like a lot of the big name speakers, whether it's like Tony Robbins or like Rachel Hollis, all of them have books, right? And so it really adds credibility and people look to you as an authority figure. And so, I mean, it does take time and commitment. Like, no doubt we had to make a lot of sacrifices on evenings and weekends while juggling full-time jobs and everything else. So, but if you feel like you have a message to share with the world and you can help solve problems, then having a book is a really great avenue and also an income source too. So,
Sure. That's awesome. How'd you guys meet?
I guess I'll answer that. Sure. So we met
I've interviewed
online.
a couple before on my show. That's why.
Yeah, on OkCupid. I think it's still around. So it's an online dating site, and that was back in 2014. There's a way to see who has viewed your profile, like a sort of like a history. And I noticed that Sandy had checked out my profile, and my first message to her was, "Hey Sandy, I noticed you checked out my profile, and we had a lot in common. We had about 95% match. They have you answer different questions, and the more questions that you answer with the same answer gives you a higher match percentage. And we had a 95 match percentage. And I just said,
Wow.
hey, why didn't you message me? And then that's what started the conversation. And then a few weeks later, we met up in person and started dating, and the rest is history.
Very cool. That's an awesome story. So we're going to wind it down just a little bit now, guys. And usually at the end of each of my shows, I ask 3 simple questions. The first one being, we talk a lot about books. Besides your own books, do you have any other books that kind of inspired you? You mentioned Tony Robbins and a couple other figures to write your own. Any other inspirations? Like any specific books?
sure. Yeah, I would say there's so many books that I love and recommend. I would say one of them that comes to mind is by David Bach, and his one of his titles is called Smart Women Finish Rich. And I think he had come out with a second edition about a year ago. And he's written probably at least 10 books by now, and probably looking to retire in Italy sometime soon. So, but his is really great. It's also in that finance realm and really focuses on why women should be looking to save their money and also invest it. And he talks a little bit about his background and how he learned from his grandmother. And it's nice because I looked up to him as a role model, and it really kind of helped us to figure out our personal finances as a couple, and to really organize it. Because for us, like, we have an Excel document where we keep track of our net worth, our rental properties, our monthly budget, and we monitor it from time to time. And so that kind of helped set us in the right direction to keep those things, at the forefront and easily accessible, and to monitor our financial goals.
Mm-hmm. So for my favorite book, I would say A Shoe Dog. I don't know if you've heard about it, the story about Nike. It's become kind of a cult hit, and unless you're into shoes, you probably wouldn't have heard about it, but it does talk about I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he's the guy that started Nike from scratch, like over 40 years ago, and how he was dealing with these Japanese suppliers, and then he ended up overtaking those suppliers and making the shoe himself, and the rest is kind of history. So that's kind of stands out as a pretty unique story because it was sort of one man's vision to bring it to life, and behind every brand and company is someone that is driving that company. So that was pretty inspiring for me.
Shoe Dog. Okay, I'll have to get my hands on that. And we talked a lot about authority figures. Do you guys have a specific role model? And hopefully, it's your parents. I know you mentioned that before.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I would say most recently would be Rachel Hollis. She speaks on stage, with Tony Robbins and all of that. Like, she's like a motivational speaker, and also wrote several books. And I found that by reading her books, it was quite motivating and touching to hear about her background, where she came from nothing, and now she's able to help specifically women to be able to find their passions, to help grow their business, and all the kind of like daily life challenges that we face. And she helps us to kind of realize, like, hey, it's not the end of the world, and kind of we're able to look at things in a more lighter picture and be able to kind of look back and laugh at things maybe. So yeah, I think it's Rachel Hollis at the moment is really great.
And then for a current role model, I would say Mike Dillard. Have you heard about Mike Dillard?
Heard the last name.
Yeah, so he's he used to have a brand called Self-Made Man, and I've been listening to his podcast for a couple of years, and he rebranded recently to just the Mike Dillard Show. So he's got his own podcast, and he only interviews entrepreneurs with large businesses, typically 7-figure businesses and higher. And it's just fascinating to hear some of those stories. So it's really motivating to hear some of the crazy challenges that they've had, because in some sense, I never thought about that until recently, but now I kind of consider myself an entrepreneur, having started several businesses before. We have a real estate business, and now we have our book business. So you do need to think like an entrepreneur, and I would say to listeners, you don't have to go to school for entrepreneurship, even though I think it's available nowadays. But it's all about thinking creatively outside of the box, and thinking differently is actually what's going to garner you success. Because if you think the same as everyone else, then you're just kind of following the herd and the crowd. So you have to be able to think differently and be willing to have an opinion that's different than other people.
Sure, no, it's very important. And so outside of all this, what are your hobbies? Do you have any? Do you have time for hobbies?
We do.
Hobbies together or individually?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for fun?
Yeah, well, we used to do more volleyball as a hobby. We would play together, but then ever since COVID started, we haven't been able to do that. But biking, I think, is now sort of a hobby, especially during the summer months. We've been biking for a couple of years, and we're lucky to have a lot of trails nearby in Toronto. So biking.
And then also cooking too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we took a cooking class at a local college a few years ago, and it's just like a basic 101 cooking class. That was about 12 weeks, and that was I would say pretty life-changing, because even before, we would cook on our own and follow some recipes, but after having learned from an instructor, it really helped to enhance all of our meals that we make. And especially now, with the pandemic where we're always at home, we try to come up with creative recipes, and even trying new appliances. We love our Instant Pot, and I think there's a huge community around that. So we just love being able to be creative in the kitchen and come up with different types of cuisines that we get to enjoy.
And one thing I always love to share is that, so when you think of cooking, you think of cooking different items, and chopping is one of them. And I still remember when I was chopping an onion for the first time, and our chef actually said to me, "Albert, you're chopping an onion wrong." And I was so mortified. I'm thinking, I've cut an onion this way for my whole life. And then he took a fresh onion and said, you got to cut it in half this way. And then it's just the way that you do certain things. Now I cut my onions differently, and I secure my cutting board, which these are some basic things that you don't even think about. But once a chef tells you, you got to make sure you have your cutting board is secure, or else it's going to be moving around and you're not really handling your knife safely, right?
Sure, that makes sense. And it definitely helps on the budget too, cooking and, eating at home, that's for sure. And you may not notice it right away, but you look at your statements and it's like, wow, I didn't spend this much on going out to dinner. I kind of like it. So that's awesome. So we'll wind this down now, Sandy and Albert. Really appreciate you both coming on. Definitely check out Sandy's book, The Money Master, Inside Secrets on How to Make Your Money Grow and Stay Safe, and Albert's book, Checkmate, How to Win the Sales Game in Healthcare. Where can people find your books?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, sandyyong.com. That's spelled SANDYYONG.com, and you can make a purchase, and I will send you a physical copy, and it includes free shipping. The other alternative is that I'm also on Amazon, and if you'd like to purchase the Kindle version, you can do that too.
Mm-hmm. And my website is checkmatebook.ca. So as I mentioned earlier, for all your listeners, they can get a no trick, you can get a free downloadable copy of the book. And I'm also on social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then I'm also getting set up on Amazon as well.
Awesome. And we'll have links to your books and your social media profiles for our listeners in the comment section of my social media and on our iTunes description box. So we'll wind this down now, guys. It's been a little over a half hour. So I really appreciate you both coming on, and I hope our listeners got something out of it. I sure did. And hope to have you on again soon and see where you guys are over the next year or so.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'd love that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anthony.
Great, guys. Thank you.